For she is coming here to show you. Meet me in the temple above. For she is coming here to guide you. There's nothing else to remember. There's nothing else you need to forget. There's just a coming home, sweet darling. Your heart will guide the rest. In the temple of Magdalene, you will see kindness and no way. In the temple, you will feel love come home. Just recognize you are home. Meet me in the temple of love. For she is coming here to guide you. She looks in the darkness for love, and there is nowhere clothes won't find you. There's nothing else to remember. There's nothing else you need to forget. There's just a coming home, sweet darling. Your heart will guide the rest. In the temple of Magdalene, she will guide you beyond what you see. In the temple, you feel it's so welcome, and you can let her in. There's no need to hide. It's time to be seen in the temple of Magdalene. Open your spirit to her, your heart will lead. Let me show you the mirror and come home to see. In the temple of Magdalene, you will see kindness and no way. In the temple, you'll feel love come home. Just recognize and dance the rose.
Thank you, thank you. Greetings and welcome, everybody. I would love if you could have your screens on, if it's possible. It really, really shifts the dynamic and the energy in the space when I can get your feedback, and we're creating a coherent field here today. So being able to see you, I know for some people who are like in different time zones, it could be really difficult if you're tuning in from the other side of the world and it's the middle of the night. So I appreciate you making an effort. And for those of you who are in Australia, if you need to turn it off at some point, totally understand. But yeah, everyone who can have them on, that'd be wonderful. Thank you. It's a beautiful group. So I chose that song. One, it always moves me. It takes me a minute to drop in, and then it really moves me. You know, she talks in that song about the themes of home and the temple and being guided, and that like deep but yet very sweet connection with spirit. And it almost reminds me of like that parent-child connection that many of us have with spirit, the goddess, with God, with source, you know, whatever you choose to call that deity, that when um, we are in times of peril or crisis or chaos or trouble, and we don't know who to turn to, there's that ability to go to the mother and just rest inside of her temple, and to be able to feel at home, you know, like in that temple space and in our bodies. Venus now is moving out of the underworld, and my deep, deep underworld experience has been all around themes of being at home in the body and not feeling safe in my body, as it did some very strange and mysterious things. And you know, it's been this theme that I've been working on, as it's my underworld experience has so mirrored Venus's movements. So it's like now I'm gently kind of starting to come out and starting to feel better, although I'm still in my underworld chair. It's not usually where I sit, but um, I've started to do everything that I can to support uh, my body, or how do I say this? Not having a fear of just being in this human body. And Mary Magdalene, as one of the, you know, like the many priestesses or goddesses of the rose lineage, you know, one of the things she really represents for us, or I think, you know, the fractal that she holds, is that descent into immanence, that, you know, that kind of idea of coming into the body. One of her stories is about like having a possession and having 7 devils cast out. Now, we always have to take some of these stories with a grain of salt. We don't know if they've been manipulated by patriarchy, but, you know, it's an interesting story, or myth, whatever you want to call it, to tune in with, because that descent down into the body, you know, that being at home with our just our humanity is tough. It's tough. We don't live in a world that supports deep connection with the body and the spirit, and that like temple or that template of wholeness. We live in a world that really promotes participation in matrix-like activities. And so every one of us that's here on this call today, who's interested in the rose mysteries, who is, you know, finds themselves a red woman or somebody who is part of this lineage, it's a brave thing to do, to step outside of that matrix. And so having these meetings, coming into temple space, spending time together, finding support. I don't think I could have moved through underworld without having opened the underworld container. As soon as I got, not calling it sick because I don't want to spell myself, but as soon as this experience in my body started to happen, I was like, maybe I shouldn't have opened a container. How am I going to hold a container while my body is doing this very strange thing? And I quickly realized, oh no, there's a reason we have the container. It's here to hold me as well. And very interestingly, I'm in my Saturn opposition, and Saturn speaks to us all about containment, right? Like how we hold ourselves, how we contain our field, the protections we have up, the armoring we have up. Is it too much? Is it too little? You know, we think of Saturn as the planet having rings around it, right? So Saturn's kind of contained the planet inside of his rings. And part of the reason I'm bringing this Saturnine theme is not only am I in my Saturn opposition, but tomorrow we're going to have the Capricorn full moon, which is a Saturn ruled sign. And Saturn's also the connected to like the Abrahamic religions and some of that energy. So it's important. And I know I didn't list this on the thing, but it's been coming in really strongly all day to speak to this theme of lineage. So as I have been kind of down a little bit, or yeah, I've been in this cocooned, like restful space for the last several weeks. I've been looking at my website, just a little bit like we do. We want to refresh things. And I was looking at my about page and reading what I had written a couple years ago, and I'm like, yeah, this is really interesting. So I kind of start with an introduction of myself at the beginning of my life because I'm an adoptee, and there are several gifts that come from how our childhood begins. So it's always something that you want to speak about. And I talk a little bit about my ancestry and my lineage, and then I talk about I got married to a man who was Palestinian, and we needed to live in Palestine for several years before he could come here. And so I talk about the first time my feet hit the land of Israel and I breathed in the air. This was a very important activating moment for my own journey with the feminine. And then I go on to talk about coming home and teachers and all of that. And I said, my about page, and this has been working me now. This was like a couple of weeks ago that I was reading this. My about page isn't really an about page, and I don't really want to list a resume. Everything that is fed into this page is my lineage, like from my origins, from my birth mother to the parents who raised me, to the ancestors who support me, to the experiences that I've had in my own life following this kind of red thread path that has taken me into some deep and winding, strange corridors, right? And then to the teachers that I've had that have fed me and taught me. All of that is part of my lineage. And when we drop in with the essence, the frequency, or the consciousness of Mary Magdalene, we are not just dropping in with one woman. We are dropping in with this web of connections that stems back so much longer than just herself. We're dropping in with an entire lineage. And so it's so appropriate at this time that so many people are feeling connected to Mary Magdalene, because if you think about it, 2000 years later, there would be a gigantic web of her own ancestors, right? Or her own lineage that had been born, right? And so I've always felt, teaching Venus work, that there is a red thread that runs through all of us, and that the people who feel called to Magdalene, or even to the mysteries of Magdalene and Yeshua and that connection, are somehow like that's being awakened right now in some strong way. And so when you look at the faces of the people on this call, or you feel into the energy, or you see your sisters and brothers online speaking about Mary Magdalene, they aren't just somebody who's like interested. There's something rising right now that is awakening, I really believe, the sons and daughters of this lineage to come in and to support Earth in a different way at this time. And I think it has to do with astrology. I think there is no doubt that it is, the timing right now is very important. We are absolutely moving from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius. And so, yeah, I want to take a minute to drop in, and then I will start to talk about, I'm hoping to get through everything. I set a very ambitious agenda for the call, hoping we can get through all of it. But let's drop in right now with just where Venus is. And before we do that, let's take 30 seconds to, if everyone who at least has their camera on, to connect with the people that are on the screen, and connect with them not in the way that these are strangers who have come to learn something or they're researching something, but in a way that these are the members of your lineage, that these people, wherever they are on the earth, are anchoring that red thread energy, right, in their neck of the woods, in their city, their country, and really appreciating that, because there's a level of mastery, that you have to get to by the time this kind of really starts to awaken. And so I see all of you as sisters and people on the path. And I deeply appreciate the Magdalene, the red lineage that lives and is animated and embodied through your lives. Yes. Beautiful. I know each and every one of you has something that you're contributing to the world through your priest or priestesshood skills. And I could feel it. Did you guys feel it? Like the energy shifted, right? There was this acknowledgement of that deep and an honoring of that deep current, that blueprint that each one of you carries, right? That's being awakened at this time. And it doesn't matter. Don't judge where you are on this path, right? Just acknowledging that it's alive, it's awakening within you, right? And it will, if you surrender to it, take you on a journey. Something we talk a lot about in Sky Dancer is this idea of the thread, the red thread, and where it's leading us, and how we're kind of following it from truth to truth to truth to truth all the time, because we're devoted to it, right? Like the red thread becomes a beloved in our lives that sometimes we'll tie a knot somewhere once we've mastered something so we don't slide back too far, but we continuously follow this red thread and listen in to what it's telling us. And that red line awakens more and more, it purifies more and more. So thank you for going through that exercise with me and honoring each and every person on this call today. So right now, this call actually is a call that we opened. So normally what we'd be doing today is just meeting with Sky Dancer participants and going over what kind of is going on with Venus, and then talking about, we're in what is called the underworld Earth star chakra of the Venus journey. So Venus began her journey in the sign of Leo, which is really important, all the way back in August of 2023. And she always begins her journey in retrograde. And when Venus is in retrograde, she is between the Earth and the Sun. So she's very close to us. So the retrograde Venus is fiery, right? She's getting bathed in the light of the sun. And then that is being, with her in front of the sun, kind of distributed down on Earth. And Venus, when she rises as morning star, she has a very fiery energy. In fact, the Mayan culture, who is very Venusian oriented, used to use the rise of Venus as morning star as a moment when, if they needed to make an attack, that they would strategize beginning a war, because the energy is just that strong and it's just that potent. And there's a long lineage, right? Part of our lineage here. There's a long tradition in the fertility goddess lineage of the goddess being with a lover, both having this erotic current that lives through her, and being a war goddess, right? We find that with Inanna, several of the goddesses. So they rule love and war. And that's an interesting tension to drop in with. And so we chose for, the beginning archetype of our Sky Dancer journey, with the Venus rising in Leo, the archetype of Sekhmet, who is kind of the fierce face of Horus. And so we traveled with that energy of Sekhmet all down through, that thread was pulled through our Venus journey. And the morning star journey takes about 9 months. So Venus traveled from Leo all the way through to Aries. And then she descended into the underworld. And I did a transmission that is public that went over her underworld chart. And so she was right next to Eris, the goddess of chaos and discord. Eris, who is Ereshkigal, her dark sister. So she descended right in that conjunction, and she was squaring Pluto at the time. So it was a beautiful underworld signature. And Aries has that energy of I am. So the sovereignty, like who am I, with no additions and no subtractions. And so we knew that that could be a clue about what our underworld journey might entail. Like what themes are we going to be looking at in the underworld? And of course, I know for me, they have been really all around this essence of loss of attachment, loss in general. There was a lot of grief, but like how destabilizing and uncomfortable it is to actually be in this energy that is just me and I'm the only one there, right? This for me, my underworld journey started when my dad told me he was ill. And my dad stayed home with me when I was a baby because my mom was the one working. And so he was my first deep attachment after having spent time in a foster home and been taken from my mom. My dad was that first home for me. And so hearing that he's very sick and potentially not going to be here for much longer kind of sent this cascade throughout my body. And I've been dealing with all throughout my underworld themes, this primordial fear, like it's fear rising that doesn't have a name. It's not attached to an event that I can remember, but I know it is attached to um, like being alone, being abandoned. You could say, like not having my throne, the energy of my throne to hold me, lack of containment, like I talked about. But everybody else had a different underworld experience. So Venus was in the underworld from the end of April. She made her second conjunction with the sun on June 4th in Gemini. And then she finally rose in her evening star phase at what we call her Helical rise on July 10th. And that's part of why we're calling this a celebration, because when Venus is in the underworld, what she's done is she went through Leo and then all of the signs all the way to Aries. And at that point, she was now behind the sun. So she travels with the sun for like 60 to 90 days, but she's on the far, far side. She's so far away from Earth, and her influence isn't getting to us, right? She's on the other side of the sun, and she's really being, they're really in a deep alchemical union, doing some very kind of like deep alchemical work together, these two planets, when she's in the underworld. But it can feel hard to tune into her. It's like the goddess has left. She's gone into her own stage of purification. And so we can really feel the depth of the underworld, or like the connection that we have to love or to attachment, or the things that she rules is kind of missing. And the more you sensitize yourself to the Venusian current, which is the current of the red line, the more I think we end up really seeing how much of our lives experiences really do mirror the movements that she's making. And her cycle is so beautiful as the cycle of creation, or the cycle of alchemy, right? So every 18 months, we're having this beautiful experience of kind of birthing something new, and allowing it to really blossom and come into full fruition, right? And then now that's ours because we fully alchemized it. It's become part of our medicine. And then we kind of begin the journey again, right? And so right now, Venus is at her heliacal rise stage. She rose in the sign of Cancer. And in my cosmology, meaning my own, right? Like I have learned this cycle from various different teachers. Shamanic Astrology Mystery School was instrumental as part of my lineage. And they look at the rise as being extraordinarily important, right? And I know in my body, I can tell from the way I feel in my body that the conjunction is equally as important. And so instead of feeling the need to choose, right, because that's such a dominator paradigm, like you've got to stick with one of these, I always just look at both. Well, what does the conjunction have to tell us? And what is the rise speaking to? And how are both of those components going to feed into the evolutionary curriculum of the red thread, and like what red thread women are going to be following for the next 9 months? And in Sky Dancer, another thing we do a lot is practice this idea of weaving, like not getting pulled into diversionary tactics, not needing to have to choose, kind of collapsing duality, working with paradoxes. And how do we thread those paradoxes together, those seemingly disparate things, and make them into a conclusive whole, right? And so, what does the Gemini and Cancer speak to? Um, and yeah, I think I'll start here and then we'll go into the energy of the evening star, just because this is where we are currently in the sky. So we'll stop and actually put a little bit of focus on the Gemini and Cancer. So Gemini is a sign that is ruled by Mercury. And Mercury is the planet of, he's like, we call him a he, but really he's got this energy of, he's very hermaphroditic in a sense, where he can take on the energy of the masculine and feminine and synthesize them, or the sacred androgyne. So he's got this kind of very integrated sense of polarity. And he rules, he's like a trickster god, and he's lots of fun. He likes to play jokes on people in all of his mythology. He's got little wings on his heels to signify his job is the messenger of the gods. And so Mercury's got this really interesting facet of him that makes him a psychopomp, or a conduit between worlds. Another thing they call him is the throat of the gods. And Mercury in our cosmology rules the throat chakra. He rules communication, speaking, all of the different ways that we send out information. He rules sound in general, is his element. Sound, reverberation, vibration. So of course he also rules music. But in esoteric astrology, Venus is the ruler of Gemini. And for a while, when I was a beginning astrology student, I heard that bit of information. I'm like, that's really weird. I wonder why that is. And I couldn't find an answer that satisfied me right away. I was a new astrology student, but I was also kind of a new spiritual student as well. And so I didn't get the esoteric pieces as much. And we work with a lot of the esoteric pieces in Sky Dancer, because the esoteric pieces are where the mystery lives. So sometime later, I learned that the Lover's card rules Gemini. And I thought that's weird, because the Lover's card is ruled by, or Gemini is ruled by Mercury, and it's all about like communication and information. Like, what does that have to do with love, right? It's about duality, separateness, like two different things, binaries, right? But the esoteric is always about how we evolve, how we move beyond, right, the thing. And so I soon understood why Venus ruled Gemini in esoteric astrology, is because there is this coming together, this bringing together, this integration within ourselves. So the Lover's card also has a sacred third in it. In every Lover's card, there's symbolism in the tarot to kind of point us to the thing. And so there's this sacred third, or representation of spirit, either through a sun or through an angel, or through a pole. Sometimes a pole will kind of signify the sacred third. There's two things in a tarot suite. And so what we're looking at with Gemini is mapping binary, because this is an important skill. And then we're looking at how do we weave those two together to make an integrated whole. And so I'm speaking kind of very cryptically in a sense. And so the work, let's talk about the work. The work in Gemini is all about the recognition of other and how that other gets brought in, right? Libra is a sign that's very much like that, in the sense that it's about relationships and actual other. Gemini is the third sign of the zodiac. And so we know that's a clue. We know that what he's speaking to is more about what's happening within us. It's still part of that developmental process that is going on between us and evolution, our own sacred contracts, our own incarnation, right? And so, one of the things that we say Gemini rules is the twins, right? Castor and Pollux, Gemini is like that sign of the twins. And so I like to look at I don't even know if this is an archetype, but we'll call it that for right now, that archetype of the twin flame. Or the sacred twin, or this idea that we all have a spiritual twin that lives, in some other place. And why then? Did any of you guys hear the transmission I did? Because I don't want to be too redundant. I did a transmission about this, about the Gemini energies and and then I did one about Saturn and Neptune, where I talked about that feeling of being very far away from our spiritual home. Not too many of you? Okay, good, because just don't want it to be redundant. So let me see how I weave this together. So we'll move to Cancer now. Let me see if I can weave these together. Do you guys kind of understand the gist of, or does it land as true that there is some home spiritually that we feel connected to, but not connected to as earth beings, as humans, like in this lifetime? Yeah, okay. So that's sort of the essence of what we'll be looking at deeply with Gemini, right? Like what is that connection, and how do we actually plug into it so it doesn't feel so elusive, so that we aren't constantly met with the pain of that separation, right? Because this is about connection and integration. And so now then we have Cancer, which is also a sign of home and domesticity. And so in addition to that, we kind of bring into this Venus cycle that the themes around, because this is where she rose, the themes around our own kind of like loss of place. So not only do we have this spiritual sort of desire to go home, and then and home being sort of the place that our sacred twin lives. Like we know that we exist somewhere else, right? Like we know that, but it's hard to put language around it. And then there's also this phenomenon, for at least for people who live in the West or who are disconnected from their indigenous roots and lands and ancestors, about, like we are orphans of place as well. Like I know I live in the United States, but when you look at my ancestry, very recently, my ancestors came over from England and Wales, and I have ancestors that lived in Crete, and I would love to connect with that land, but this is where I live. And so there's a disconnection that so many of us have to that idea of place. I'll tell you, when you do study Mary Magdalene and you follow her line back, like all the way to Zep-Tepi, right, before the flood, like when the Sphinx was built by the gods in Egypt, like this time, you notice that like that's kind of the time when all of these different cultures had built those, erected those megaliths as like they were mapping the stars onto the earth. Right, so Stonehenge is one. The Nile River was meant to signify like the Milky Way, the river of the Milky Way, right, in the galaxy. All of the different pyramids were built to connect with Orion. We have all of these megaliths all over England that kind of connect with these. I mean, they're everywhere in the world. In Ohio, we have Serpent Mound, which connects with the stars. And so whatever culture population was here before the last cataclysm, which happened in the sign of, or the age of Cancer, So this is why I'm tuning into this, because it's Cancerian. We had that beautiful age of Leo, which was like a golden age where the Atlanteans lived and the consciousness was so high and the connection to spirit was so pure and great. And then there was the flood in the age of Cancer. And this is why I think when we tune into Cancerian things, we get this reverberation of kind of disconnection and fear around place, right? Because we don't live like those cultures did. How beautiful. Just tune in with this for a minute. Take 15 seconds to really think about how different it would be to live in a culture that met, like, just take Stonehenge. We'll use Stonehenge. I think this is a beautiful example, and one a lot of us can connect in with. You know, to go and meet at these megaliths as this sacred place, and to meet there on, you know, important days of the calendar year, you know, and for Stonehenge, we know that those are the equinoxes and the solstice points, right? And so we're meeting there, and we're having reverence for the way time moves, and there's this deep connection that we feel being honored between where we are on earth and our lives here, and, you know, the as above so below. That connection isn't broken, right? How totally and completely different that is from the lives we live today, and how different that would be if we were able to live in a culture. I don't even know if the word is culture. We just got to live that, like, that holistically, that organically. It's everywhere in the world. Peru, I mean, and all over the place. Even I think in Antarctica, we have found these kind of erected structures. So it was part of the collective consciousness of the people who lived here before that flood all over the earth. It just made sense. And we are so disconnected from that now. And, you know, is Cancer is ruled by the moon. And if you come into Sky Dancer, there's some very deep moon mysteries that we work with around how Cancer kind of, where the moon pins the matrix in place, and not in a negative way. It sounds negative when I say it, but there's a whole specific function there. But also how it's the sign of our emotional pain body, right? And I think of the lights, both of the lights, so the sun and the moon, as having a connection to our inner children. And so Cancer having a connection to our emotional body as children, right? And I think of Leo as having a connection to the function of our inner child that wanted to be expressed. So we're going to stay with Cancer just for a moment here. And so there is this kind of sense that with Cancer, we're really plugging into, you know, what lives in the sacred waters of our own body, right? And, you know, as I was coming up studying astrology, I'll never forget this, because I'm a Scorpio and I have a lot of water in my chart. And I love Stephen Arroyo. He's an astrologer, and he writes some phenomenal astrology books. I mean, really, you can't go wrong if you buy one of his books. But he was talking about, he writes a book about the 4 elements. And he was talking about that people who have water in their chart, like a deep water signature, we all have water, by the way. We kind of, when we look at charts, we break up the charts and look at the elemental breakdown of a person's chart. And so even if you don't have your sun in a water sign, you may still have a lot of water in your chart. So if you don't know, I encourage you to check in with an astrologer who can tell you. But what the water does, when we have a lot of water in our chart or in the collective, you know, like the chart right now, with there being a lot of planets in Cancer, what it does is it connects us to Memnos, this like epigenetic memory that lives within us, and connects us to, you know, the cellular memory, the memory that lives through the DNA, the memory that lives through the causal body and the causal field, and everything that is connected to, you know, the etheric cord of ours between lifetimes. And so when we have strong water signatures in the collective, it can bring up this, what seems to be like disembodied memory. And so a lot of times we can experience that as fear. I'll give you an example of what I'm saying. Like, have you ever woke up and just felt off or had a sense of impending doom for no reason? And you can't connect it to anything. And so we as humans who love to make stories will just kind of be like, maybe it's because, I've had a really tough week at work and I haven't had enough downtime. And so that's why I'm feeling this. But in reality, it's really connected to some kind of ancestral imprint, lineage imprint, or even like past life imprint. And something has happened that has triggered that. And so when we get a lot of planets in Cancer or Pisces or Scorpio, or a lot of things connecting into those signs, we can tend to have these kind of psychic, intuitive memories rise within the waters of our system, right? And so in the Venus rise chart, and I have videos for this that flesh this out. So if you guys want to listen to those transmissions where I go deeply into it. In the Venus rise chart, it's really interesting. We've got the sun at 19 Cancer and Venus at the anaretic degree, 29 degrees Cancer, which is exactly where the full moon is happening tomorrow. Connecting in with the sun, connecting in with Saturn, and Venus connecting in with Neptune at the very last degree of the entire zodiac. And so this is a strong water signature. As you can imagine, these two trines are in the Venus heliacal rise chart. So what is that saying about what Venus is asking us to explore? What are the Venusian women? We're all on this similar evolutionary path as we're awakening together. What are we being asked to explore? And it is that connection between, or should I say disconnection between place on the human sense, like on the human level, and how we are sort of disconnected from the land and disconnected from the rituals that connect us back into that twin blueprint, that twin place that is that spiritual home where our kind of sacred twin lives. And part of me, I hope I am making sense. There is not great language for this idea of the twin soul that lives in another dimension. But, I've never said it to anybody and had them go, I'm not following you. There's this like knowing that there is some part of us that is connected to us, yeah, we just can't get to it, and it's in this other dimension kind of, and it's a beautiful place. Like I have that sense, right? It's kind of like the higher self, maybe, like sort of, but not really. But maybe that's decent language to point us in the right direction. And because we're working with the mystery, I'm not really worried about it. I'm not worried about having the proper language, because how we learn about this is through it opening within us, through it blossoming through our own life experience. So instead of being worried about fleshing it all out with language, what we do is we just kind of like take the themes in and go, okay, I'll roll that around. I'll wonder about that. I'll be an inquiry about that. I'll see where the synchronicities live. Where am I feeling that come through? And then over time, there's like an experience or a knowing that comes online that connects us deeper into that. And so this pairs so beautifully, these themes around this Cancerian kind of awakening of the bigger sense of who we are, and the wound. I don't love the word wound, but gosh, I just don't have a better one in the moment. The wound of disconnection here, right? And that kind of idea of the twin, and where that is alive in us, and how that relates to the work that we're going to do in the world. And the evening star phase is the phase of Venus's journey that we think of as being ruled by Libra. So we've got the kind of morning star phase, which a lot of astrologers would say is ruled by Taurus. I kind of think it's too fiery to only be ruled by Taurus. So we'll add a little like Taurus Aries energy in there, and that's like you've got the morning star essence. And then the evening star is very much like Libra. And Libra is like the transcendent goddess, the goddess who is ascending. And the evening star side of the journey is the ascension part of Venus's cycle. And Libra deals with themes of other. It deals with, we're in Taurus, we might look at like, what are my values around myself? How do I want to take care of my body? What are the values I hold around, like just that kind of like the essence of the moon. It's very close to the earth. So it's like very close to Taurus. The moon's exalted in Taurus. So I'm bringing the moon in here, but like my sense of values and how I want to live my own life towards myself, like looking inwards, right? Whereas Libra is looking outwards. And so, Venus here is concerned with values around others. What are my values for the collective? What are my values around justice? What are my values around diplomacy? How do I want to work with other people? How do I want to be in relationship with other people? And so on the morning star side of the Venus cycle, we work deeply with this kind of descent into immanence and coming into the body and getting to know the self. And in the underworld, we kind of get that like that very deep experience all in a very short time. So those who have been on the underworld journey with us kind of know that like we prepare for it in the morning star phase, but we really kind of feel it in the underworld. Like we prepared, we got ready, then we did this big node of work in the underworld. And now it's time to take what we've excavated, right? What we've learned about ourselves. Like there's a sense of freshness or newness here. Like there's something has been taken off, something has been revealed. And let me tell you, it is not one and done with Venus. So it's not like everything has been revealed and I've taken it all off. This is just an ongoing lifetime spiral. So it's just something has been revealed, right? For me, it is really about needing to come into a greater intimacy with my body and greater capacity for not being afraid when my body moves into the unknown, because it's very connected to this primordial kind of fear that I think connects into that etheric, a past life. I don't know what it is, but I tend to get very afraid if I get sick or, and it's connected to birth and death. I realized that in this last week, like there's something here too that connects into the fear of birth or death or both, because they're very close to each other in terms of big lifetime experiences. And so, I mean, that's a lot, that's big work, right? Since it's probably going to take me, I don't know, close to the rest of my life. I don't know how long, but something's been revealed. So all of us sort of have had a revelation throughout this beginning part of the Venus cycle. And the evening star phase is really about like, okay, well, how do we bring that into our lives and kind of work that out? Because if we always just keep it inside, this is why I think Venus's cycle is so balanced and holistic. Like we can be isolated spiritual seekers and just always do our work on our own and never have anything mirrored back to us, never take our spiritual work out into the world, never test, ourselves in new ways. I like to say that Venus is the ruler of exposure therapy. So like, once you've had a revelation, like I'm not self-expressed enough and I'd like to be more fully self-expressed. The only way to really do that is to kind of take it into the lab, out of the classroom and into the lab and start, experimenting, trying things, right? And so the evening star phase is really where we take what's been revealed and we start kind of like putting those pieces into practice. We put ourselves out there a little bit more. We start to trust our medicine. We start to understand that what has been revealed for us is medicine at all in the first place, right? So when Venus rises from the underworld, she is on the very far side of the sun again, and she's very low to the horizon. When she rises as morning star on on the back end of that retrograde, she's still very close to the earth. So she's very high in the sky and she's bright and everyone's like, woo, Venus rose, and she's so potent and big and beautiful. But when she rises on the evening star side, she's low to the ground. She's not very bright because she's very far away. And she makes this very elegant, slow, angelic entrance. And so essentially what we've got is like Venus moving away from the earth. So it's like a, what do you call it? Like an illusion, right? So it's not really that she's going down, it's that she's moving far away and it just appears like she's moving down, right? And then she goes to the other side of the sun and she's down, far away. So she's down close to the horizon. And then as she comes closer to us, it appears like she's rising. So that's where we get that idea of she's rising again. And so the Venusian energies on the evening star side are not as potently felt as the morning star side when it begins. And I absolutely love and thank Venus for her intelligence in this, because it is very difficult to move from an underworld experience into this like bright, fiery energy, right? Like that just doesn't work. So we get to continue to be very gentle with ourselves, to have this slow emergence. Like if you're still feeling very underworldy right now, that's totally normal. Like if you I feel like I'm a toe out or like a toe in on the other side of the underworld. Like that's about it. I've got like I've dipped my toe in the I might be getting out of the underworld kind of thing right now. And that is perfect. So evening star energy is looking for the things that Libra it deals with. It is looking for synthesis. It is looking for harmony. It's looking for balance. Libra is definitely, it's one of the most intense mystery schools of all of the science. I think of all of the sciences as being its own mystery school, but she deals with like judgment, right? Or this idea of Mott with the scales, like the heart weighing less than the feather. And that idea of what does that really mean? That means karma, like this kind of cause and effect. And so there's this sense that with Libra, we really do want to spend some time integrating and distilling all of the lessons so that we can clear karma that came up during the morning star or the underworld phase, and then fully integrate that into our bodies and our experience so that, we've lightened our load a little bit. And so she's looking at, harmony, balance. Libra rules proportion, and it's that idea of like everything, there being just enough of everything, right? And how proportion in art is so important when we're looking at a beautiful painting. If you've got like a woman whose body is out of proportion to a person standing beside her, it doesn't end up making sense. And so how this balance is actually important in how we experience the world, right? We have to have a certain kind of balance or harmony, like when we listen to music, for it to be enjoyable, for it to move us in a specific way. And so you can think about how on the esoteric level, like the deeper background level, that's what we're doing with our experiences, is we're now looking at like how do I take this really challenging thing I found, or this thing that was really revealed in the underworld and it feels so out of place, or I made a choice because I saw a truth that was out of alignment with the way I was living. And if I made this choice, it was going to upend my whole world, like pull the carpet out from underneath it. But I moved forward with it anyways because I knew it was the truth. So now you're in this sort of blank slate moment. And so the evening star energies will support us in kind of like smoothing that out and beginning to like look at like, okay, what do I want to add in here on this blank canvas that I have? And we can be very particular that it's just one little thing at a time. Okay, so is that landing with everybody as making sense? Yeah, okay. Does anyone have any quick questions? Like, is there any part of that that felt confusing? No? Okay. I was thinking we might take, I've got this really ambitious list of things that I wanted to get through today. I want to take a look at my notes and see what I have and haven't talked about. Oh yes, I want to cover the Cancer Leo energy and the Mars, where Mars is, what Mars is doing, and then the Lilith in Libra. So why don't we take a 5-minute break? I need to move my body a little bit, and everybody can get up, get a glass of water, go to the bathroom if you need one, and then we'll come back at 3 o'clock my time. Sound good? You want to throw music on, Jess?
Meet me in the temple of love, for she is coming here to show you. Meet me in the temple above, for she is coming here to guide you. There's nothing else to remember. There's nothing else you need to forget. There's just a coming home, sweet darling. Your heart will guide the rest. In the temple of Magdalene, you will see kindness and knowing. In the temple, you will feel love come home. Just recognize you are home. Meet me in the temple of love, for she is coming here to guide you. She looks in the darkness for love, and there is nowhere clothes won't find you. There's nothing else to remember. There's nothing else you need to forget. There's just a coming home, sweet darling. Your heart will guide the rest. In the temple of Magdalene, she will guide you beyond what you see. In the temple, you feel it's so welcome, and you can let her in. There's no need to hide. It's time to be seen in the temple of Magdalene. Open your spirit to her, your heart will lead. Let me show you
Beautiful. Not sure if Jess is there. I'm hoping the song doesn't reset. Okay, good. If you could turn your cameras back on, I would love that. Thank you. Thank you so much for those of you who can. So I want to begin the second half of our transmission here today, talking a little bit about, I'm going to start with a story about my own life. So when I arrived in Palestine, it was 2005, and I was 25, 26 years old at the time. And I was going to live with my new husband, someone I had never lived with before in my life. We did not live together when we dated here in the States. And we had been married but separated because he was there and I was here for about 7 months. And then, I arrived there to live with him, which felt very brave and very exciting. I mean, I was thrilled, I was in love and we had been separated. So I was just thrilled. And he wasn't able to meet me at the airport in Israel because he's Palestinian. And so I had to make the journey from the airport into Palestine on my own. He sent like a friend, somebody who had a pass to get into Israel proper to come and pick me up. And actually, I've always been really glad that I had that sort of time between the plane ride and the getting to see him to like greet the land first in a way, right? Like I couldn't talk to this guy who had picked me up. I knew he was an associate or friend of my husband's, but he spoke Arabic and I spoke English. And so there was just this hour and a half of like no talking, calm, with the windows down in the car. And I was just driving and like soaking in the land of this place. And then I spent in total several years living there. I would spend a year here and then I'd come back home for a year and then I'd go back and it turned out that way because I got pregnant with my son and we wanted him to be born in the US, so we didn't have immigration stuff. So then I spent my pregnancy getting health care in the US and letting him be born and waiting for his passport to come in. And then I went back for a year and then finally his visa was coming in, and then we've gone back and spent really large chunks of time. So I've really gotten to know this land and this place, and I have been everywhere in it, like as like a tourist in a way. Like there are all these exciting and really interesting places to visit in the Holy Land, and as somebody who carries an American passport, I can go anywhere I want. So I'm not held back by any of the political restrictions that they have between the two places. And so, the Dead Sea up in Galilee, I've gone to springs up in Nazareth. We're Christian. And so we've done all of the Christian things, the things my husband's Orthodox Christian. And so his community and family really belong to that lineage of first Christians, people who never left the land, like they have been a presence there and holding, I don't know, the pole for Christianity since the time of Mary Magdalene, let's say. And one of the things, though, as a young married woman, married to a guy who I loved, who was like my best friend, but also has a very fiery temper. He's Arabic, and I don't know, they all the men there have this, it feels to me like this embedded spirit of the lion. So they're very like honorable and noble, but they also have pride, right? Like they have this sense of pride. And he's very masculine, like in this way, right? And I'm a Scorpio, right? So I have that same sense of like pride, and I'm not a quiet, meek woman by any stretch of the imagination, and I am so unlike not all of the women I met there. There were definitely some like me, of course, but like for the most part, women in this part of the world are still raised, it's still very patriarchal, right? So they're still raised to kind of like defer to men, to be quiet when it's time to be quiet, that kind of thing. And believe me, I love this culture, so I'm not at all, I'm just speaking in realities, right? There's no judgment there. Um, and this is really when I realized that while I could tap into um, the feminine there in a way that was like incredible, like I really got a dose of what the feminine is by living there. We would, you know, each woman was sort of the priestess of her own domain, and her husband really supported her in her work as a woman. You know, like they do needlepoint craft, all these different types of crafting, and women are good at lots of different kind of like what you might think of as the womanly arts things, and they're not like feeling oppressed by it. They're proud of it, they love it. Like it's that, you know, some women are extraordinary cooks, and some do extraordinary kinds of needlework, and some women sing. And like, you know, in every wedding we'd go to, there was the one who led the call for the bride, and like she's always the one who's doing the song for everybody, you know. And so it was really amazing to be in a culture and community that celebrated women doing women's things, and like um, not having it be shameful that like I want to stay home and raise my kids versus be very out in the world trying to climb a corporate ladder. This is like the first time I experienced this being able to embrace, right, the woman part of me. And at the same time, I'm married to, like I said, this guy who is fiery, and I'm fiery. And so I saw there how the Magdalene wounds, so these seven devils, right, that were cast out of Mary Magdalene, I actually like to think about them as the Magdalene wounds that all women carry. So they're not actually devils, right? Like, think about Mary Magdalene. It was projected onto her for 2,000 years that she was a prostitute, right? Imagine living under that level of projection. I have my own kind of virgin horror wounds, so this is something I can identify with, right? The feminine pain body there in that place, I don't think it's as severe as it is here, but I was able to connect in with it in a way that I didn't here, because I have to wear so much armor here as a woman. I know that sounds maybe paradoxical or contradicts what we think, because women in the Middle East live a more cloistered type of lifestyle. But in terms of my own kind of feminine essence, I was able to be more fully self-expressed there than I was here. Here we have to move through the world, move through the matrix. And so we put all our armor on, and, you know, I was still not quite where I am spiritually at that point. I wasn't mature. I still needed to have a regular job and work and like make it in the world. And so I noticed that like in Palestine, I was a lot softer than I was here. And so I was a lot more in tune with the type of wounds that women carry, right? Um, and in there's that wound of like with Mary Magdalene, with the like the not the and the last 2,000 years, like the inability to claim our magic as women, right? That fear of being called out as a witch if we claim ourselves as medicine women, right? Does that make sense? Right? That there's the her and Yeshua were so close. They were what I would call in the proper sense, like a twin flame avatar consort couple, right? And then he was killed, he was sacrificed on behalf of the project they came in to do. And so there's abandonment inside of like the feminine pain body, right? Whether it's through a bad leaving or a good leaving, people, leave, and we carry the wounds of being abandoned. And so Mary Magdalene, I'm sorry, there's somebody I need to mute. Okay. Mary Magdalene does have this kind of capacity to show us where in our feminine pain body, or to show us or to mirror back to us our own feminine pain body. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? Yeah. And one of the things, the reason I kind of brought all that up is because then in 2016, the Vatican decided that, like, oh no, never mind. She wasn't actually a prostitute, and we're going to honor her with a feast day. And but they didn't go as far as saying that she was Yeshua's consort, right? And that they taught each other. She was no doubt a high priestess from the lineage of Isis, which is the lineage of the red thread. No doubt in my mind that she spent time learning in Egypt. Anna, the mother or grandmother of Jesus, was part of this lineage. Mary, for sure, was part of this lineage. And so I want to show you something astrologically. I'm going to share my screen and show it to you, how the Vatican admitted it but didn't admit it. Okay, they did it astrologically. So I want to show you. Hang on just a sec. There we go. So we will see that June 22nd is the day that they chose for Mary Magdalene's feast day. Wait, hold on. Yeah. And so June 22nd is the day that Cancer becomes Leo. See, look, June 22nd, the sun is still in Cancer at 3 in the morning. Now, June 22nd in the afternoon, the sun has moved into Leo. You guys all see that? So this day, every single year, is the day that Leo and Cancer come together. And what is Cancer? Cancer is the representative of the moon, or the feminine, right? The undifferentiated feminine. And Mary Magdalene is such a big personality. What they're pointing to is the feminine here, right? And Leo is the sign of the solar kings. You get that? And Jesus, Yeshua, so that would be Yeshua's sign, like his rulership, not necessarily for his birthday, but like where we think of as the Christic codes living in the sign of the sun, the sign ruled by the sun. And so I think the Vatican, without saying it, was showing us that there was a sacred integration or marriage between the goddess and Yeshua and our solar king. Does that make sense? So what's really interesting here, I want to bring this piece in now because we're going to talk about Cancer and Leo a little bit, is that Mother Mary, her feast day is the 15th of August, right? Still in the sign of Leo. And what I think is so beautiful about the age we're in, we talked a little bit about Leo being the last time there was a golden age. And part of what was going on back then were these immaculate conceptions. Like the practice of immaculate conception was something that these people with this kind of Zeptepian, Atlantean kind of consciousness had raised themselves into being able to do. And it kind of died out as we got into like the time of Jesus, and our consciousness fell. We fell into a darker place on the Kali Yuga, or what we call the precession of the equinoxes. And so it kind of shows us that Mother Mary was part of this lineage of giving birth to a single soul, like one solar king, one avatar. And then across from Leo is the sign we are moving into, Aquarius. And Aquarius is what? The sign of the people. It's the sign of like the fall of rulership by one, but like more egalitarian systems of power that are ruled by groups of people like us as part of the red lineage, right? Like it's ruled by a circle. And from what I understand, the Atlantean culture, it's not like we can know for sure, the Atlantean culture was also ruled by circles of women. Like that was really who did a lot of the decision making. Like they saw the women as the vessels of like high priestessship. And so every decision that needed to be made kind of got brought to this circle, or you could call it a council, but they were women on it. And the women were the council. And so this is like the age we're moving into, this kind of time of leadership looking very differently, or having leadership versus rulership. Does that make sense? And so what I really think is if we look at the story of Magdalene, so we have Mary who gave birth to this one vessel, this one avatar. And then she, at some point, would have given her blessing for Jesus to go with Mary Magdalene, right? Like there would have been this like exchange, like I bless you to be my son's consort, whatever. They're from the same lineage, the same mystery school of learning, and the same background. And then what did Mary Magdalene do? So after Yeshua died, Mary Magdalene goes on her own pilgrimage. She is the first prophetess. She is the one who shared the news of Jesus's death first. So she was the first preacher, for lack of a better word. And then she leaves the Middle East after he dies, and she goes into the places where Rome ruled, the places where empire had its hooks in already, right? She goes in through the Mediterranean, through Italy, into Rome, into France, makes her kind of like home there in France, but then travels all around England. And so what does this tell us about the Magdalene woman? She's not giving birth to one singular vessel at this point. I honestly think that that time is over. That's not what this new paradigm is about. I don't know that we'll even have a singular avatar for the age of Aquarius. We might, I don't know. What I think is that we're being called to do what Magdalene did. Mary Magdalene was working to seed a new paradigm on earth. And the unfortunate thing was she knew that she wouldn't live to see the fruits of it. And that's part of the Magdalene work, is that we're here to anchor and seed love on the planet, but we don't know if we'll ever see the fruit of what we work for, but we work for it anyways, because we're in such deep devotion to anchoring that current of love here and anchoring a new paradigm. So I like to say that like Mary Magdalene was like sort of the birth of this one vessel, or sorry, Mother Mary was the birth of this one vessel, but the Magdalene line, right? Even though they're of the same lineage, but the torch was passed, see, between Mother Mary and Mary Magdalene. And when the torch was passed and Mary Magdalene went out to do her work, she was kind of like a bridge birther. She was birthing this bridge to a new paradigm in a way. And I think that that's what we are all being called into as we move into this age of Aquarius, as we anchor this rose lineage or this kind of red line or red woman consciousness into our systems, right? Is that we're being called to be the birthers of the new paradigm. And it's going to look differently for all of us. Like when we talk about the energy of Leo feeding into the energy of Aquarius, what's being asked of us is that our full self-expression, the solar part of us, the sun in us, the one that gives life to the people around us, the radiant part of us, our self-expression that is unique to us, that was embedded in our birth charts at the seeding of our incarnation, that is the thing that comes out, and that is the thing that blesses the world. And so it doesn't have to look like what I'm doing, or even people you admire are doing. It has to look like your fullest expression, your fullest love, your fullest radiance, that huge heart of Leo the lion, then being radiated out into into the collective and mixing with everybody else in the collective to create a new paradigm of leadership and sort of this new earth. One of the things that I thought was interesting in these charts, the Venus Helical rise chart had Venus at 29 degrees. And I'm not going to pull her chart up again, but we obviously saw that Mary Magdalene's feast day chart has the sun solar at 29 degrees Cancer. That's not by mistake. That is an encoded message of synchronicity that these themes are what we are intended to be working with. And then both of those planets at 29th degree is doing two really important things. It's feeding into the trine with Neptune at the end of the zodiac. It's not just at the end of Pisces. It's at the end of the zodiac. I feel like swearing here to really like bring it home. At the end of the fucking zodiac. It's at the end of the zodiac. And that will elicit these feelings of Neptune. What is Neptune about? Disillusionment, like that idea of something dissolving or being taken out with the tide and pulled sort of into the void in a sense, right? There's this, so that's going to give us the sense of sort of like apocalyptic themes, right? Like there's something's being revealed, but it's also the end, and it's this culminating point of the entire zodiac. Yes, and I was going to get to that. Very good, Lindsay. Then tomorrow we have the Capricorn new moon, who is also going to be at 29 degrees, sorry, full moon. New moon or full moon? Oh my gosh. It's full moon. Of course it's full moon. Sorry, my brain does that when I'm trying to remember lots of different chart points. And so Capricorn, this degree, this 29th degree of Capricorn has been being triggered and triggered and triggered over and over again by Pluto, who's been moving in and out of Aquarius for the past 2 years. But why is this important now is because this is the last time that Pluto will move over this very specific point in the chart. And of course, 29 Cancer is in a sextile to 29 Neptune or Pisces, and so it's hitting that Neptune point, and so it continuously is like putting this plutonic energy on that end of the zodiac degree, right? And so it brings up these themes of like underworldy stuff is happening. We see the chaos in the world. It's all being made manifest and animated in the world right now. And this particular full moon is so important because it will trigger that 29th degree. Then in September, we will have Pluto move for the very last time into Capricorn. I think it's from September to December. I have to check the dates again, but it's not very long. Pluto will move back into that degree and then end that 16-year cycle once and for all of Pluto moving through Capricorn. And so there's also this sense of whenever we have a 29th degree activation in any sign in astrology, we call it like a crisis point, or it's an ending for sure. It's a culminating point. But so there is this sense, and I don't know if you guys are picking up on it, maybe etherically, maybe in the subtle layers, we've got the sun in Cancer for another day or two. So it's like, it's in the living waters of the body in a sense that like something is ending. There's something ending, and it's kind of not going to go out. This is Pluto. Pluto is a power planet, right? It's not going to go out probably quietly with the night. It might because of that Neptune sextile. So some of us might have, depending on other chart factors, a nice smooth ending that sort of like goes out with the tide. But generally when Pluto's involved, it's like, he's pretty loud once the revelation has happened. He unearths and reveals, but it can be pretty tumultuous what he shows us. I think of Pluto more as a planet that works heavily on the collective and the consciousness of the collective. I don't worry about Pluto as much in as like a bringer of death or doom or scary things in a person's chart unless like it's hitting very specific points. I don't want you guys to go, I have something by Pluto and I'm scared, right? He tends to act more on the collective unless it's like he's crossing our ascendant or our moon or our sun, and then we can have really big plutonic activations. Usually, if he's touching another planet in our chart, it's just that he's working to help us transform that area of our lives. But in the collective, he can be pretty loud when he's making a statement. And then he will move into Aquarius and spend the next 20 years showing us the shadow side of Aquarius. And so I think this is a very important time to be paying attention while we have Pluto in Aquarius. I mean, like I said, I don't know that what we see here as Magdalene women or men will be necessarily realized in our lifetime. But we will have to make some really big decisions about the ethical nature of progress, how far we let progress go, the ethical nature of technology. All of this stuff is going to need to be, we'll need to be tuning into it and lending our voices to what we'd like to see happen there. And then also, quickly, because I can sense that like we're starting to like get tired a little bit. I've been talking for a long time. There's a lot of information to take in. The masculine principle, Mars, right? So Mars is, you got that, Jess? Mars is another one of those signs that just like Venus and her heliacal rise, that like I like to look at both points. So some schools of astrology see, like shamanic astrology, mystery school sees the beginning of the Mars cycle as happening in retrograde, just like Venus. And then others see it as the conjunction. So the last time Mars was in retrograde, he was in the sign of Gemini, which is the same sign that our Venus cycle is beginning in. That's important, okay? And then he had his conjunction in Scorpio. The next time that he has his retrograde phase, he will move, he spends like 8 months in a sign. And depending on where it begins, he'll either stay 8 months in one sign, but if it begins on the cusp of a sign, he'll retrograde back into the sign before it. And so this upcoming retrograde is going to be a Leo Cancer retrograde for Mars. So Mars and Venus are moving over the same territory, right? And so given that we have the Lover's card being kind of our tarot symbolic ruler of Gemini, the themes of the masculine and the feminine will be very intertwined. And I really love that in the sense that it has felt like a long time since our destiny has been tied together, right? Like there's just been a lot of separation, and a lot of, like the war of the sexes and the genders. And then we're now going to have to figure out how to work together, right? We're going to have to figure out how to heal the parts of us that are wounded by the others so that we can have the full integration. And that's why I'm so strongly looking at Mars during this evening star phase, because it couldn't be more clear through the astrology how necessary this is. There's no longer going to be, I don't think, this, like this time when men and women are as separate as they were before. I think that we are definitely going to move, like in the sense that like we may see a female president finally in America in the near future, right? Maybe not this election, but soon. We may find that the glass ceiling for women isn't as far out, that there'll be more integration. And I think it's really important for women, because Venus is going first, to kind of bring the masculine back into the fold. I think there's been a lot of anger at men from women directed at men, and that it may be up to us to sort of be the ones who initiate, hold space for whatever you want to call it, for that type of healing to go. And because we have Neptune here, I don't even know that we need to do anything but dissolve those parts of us that hurt, that continue to perpetuate the separation between us, right? So we've got this really beautiful opportunity to put some focus on that area of our lives because of the gentle nature of how Neptune will help to dissolve these things for us, right? It's an opportunity to have dissolution versus a different kind of ending that feels more harsh, right? Or having to struggle, right, to put something to bed, having to have a huge tragedy to wake us up to the fact that we've been acting like this for too long, and then now, we should start to get together. So my hope is that we'll see that be the thing that comes to fruition, where that this kind of battle of the sexes just sort of starts to die down a little bit, and there's greater harmony and love and communication between men and women, and then the masculine and the feminine principle as well. There is so much to say. I still have stuff on my list. There is so much to cover. We will do all of that, of course, over the next 9 months in Sky Dancer. I wanted to leave just a few minutes. I know, Stephanie, you got here late. And some of you, I'm not sure if you have a little bit of time, but I wanted to leave just a few minutes for Jessica for those of you who are not in Sky Dancer, who have been interested in Sky Dancer, to talk a little bit about the journey. And I'm going to start, Jessica, because it's just not on that sheet. Essentially, what we do in Sky Dancer is we work with the chakras and the and Venus. So Venus begins her ascent journey in the root chakra. And so we work with root chakra themes as she is at that gate. And each conjunction of the moon as she ascends, we meet at a new chakra gate. So the next conjunction after the root, of course, is the sacral. We go up and we kind of look at all of those themes and what Venus is saying about those chakras and what her curriculum is in the sky. And we use the evolutionary curriculum of Venus, what she's saying, we synthesize it with the chakra, and we just end up having this gorgeous journey that is all curated by Venus herself. It's not me. I'm doing the work with you. I'm never not a student of Venus. And so she is the one who kind of like sets the curriculum for us. And then we just use the chakras kind of as a way to hold structure in this space. So I said that, Jessica, you can say what you would like to say.
So there's just so much in Sky Dancer. It's the learning of the Venus cycle map that Damascena shares with us all, sort of handing us her keys. As I love when she says that. Makes it sound more magical. But we practice alongside of each other. It's the churning of the soul through the Inanna myth, which maps directly onto the Venus sky story. And it's like the feminine version of, it's the heroine's journey, the feminine awakening. There's soul retrieval. Of course, then there's the integration and embodiment, which goes along with the retrieval of new information about yourself. And then weaving that into our lives. When we learn something new, like Damascena was saying, like how do we weave that into our lives and respond differently? So it's like the alchemy of the soul, the psyche, and what some people like to call the great work, which is also very mercurial as well and magical. So in Sky Dancer, we get all of the astrology transmissions of the current energy and how that relates to the curriculum that Venus is placing before us. And then we have just this beautiful container to share inside of with other women on the journey. And I'm not just saying this, it's like the most beautiful connection that I've ever experienced inside of a women's circle or a container like this, of just full out vulnerability, honesty, and sharing what is true for us and working through it together. Damascena and I walk the talk. We're doing the work alongside. There's Q&As with us, with the calls and the integration calls. And then there's the temple walls inside of Mighty Networks, where it's like the thread of posting photos or sharing or just words of what's going on in our lives, and we get to share that together. Let's see, I have some notes here too. Then of course there's the curriculum that goes along with each gateway, with each chakra, and the home play and practices that we all get to do together. There's so much in there that you really can't do it all. You have to pick and choose what feels true for you to sort of pick up and put into your life experience to help you to see what's going on in your world. And then you get to share that with other sisters on the journey. It's just a really open-hearted path of expression and connection and a really vibrant sisterhood. And then there's, of course, discounts on the other services that Damascena and I provide, such as her astrology readings that you can get privately. And then we have the 2 live calls a month, the transmission call and then the integration call. Transmission calls on a Saturday earlier, like today, depending on where you are in the world, of course. And then later on in the evening on a Thursday for an integration call to try to make sure we have the ability to invite everybody into a live call.
One of the things that she hasn't mentioned, and that's okay, there's a lot. Sky Dancer gives you a lot. And I like to tell people it's kind of a choose your own adventure. Like you come in, you choose the curriculum that speaks to you, and then you work it, right? And whatever you didn't get to, that's totally fine. You're curating your own initiation with Venus, right? So you'll speak to what feels alive for you in your life. You'll use that curriculum. But one of the most important pieces of Sky Dancer is the Venus blueprint. And so what we do is we learn about how Venus is being animated through our chart. We look at 7 different chart points for Venus, and then we synthesize them all. And what that gives us is our Venusian blueprint, our particular Venusian blueprint. We look at the gate that Venus was born in. So like, which chakra gate were you born in? Are you an evening star, a morning star? What sign, what house, what element, and how all of those play into your unique feminine blueprint. We learn that through the gates on the morning star side. And if you come in on the evening star side, you don't even need to wait to get through all the gates because everyone practices with their Venus blueprint. So you get that in the first or second gate. And then we look at like, okay, how do I bring my own private, unique feminine blueprint alive? How do I animate the genius of how my feminine blueprint was set up in my incarnation? I think there's so much we can do in Sky Dancer, but that continues to be a big touchstone. It's like Venus is the differentiated feminine, where the moon is the ground of undifferentiated feminine beings. You've got the moon as like this overarching archetype where she's very tribal, she's very communal. You can project like this, like you do with the moon. You can project any face onto the moon, and the feminine can hold that. But with Venus, the question becomes for all of us: who am I as the feminine? You know, like I'm not an archetype. I'm me. And how do I express? What unique archetypal makeup do I have that becomes my own and then can be expressed through my chart? How do I harness those unique places in my chart to come into my full expression around, you know, who I am as a differentiated individual? So I wanted to say that as well. But yeah, I know there's like 50 points on that list. So
Right. But that's like what you were saying about Magdalene, about the seeding, that the blueprint is exactly that. It's exactly like bringing forth who we are and what our specific flavor of new paradigm is that we're sharing with the world. And one of my favorite things about Sky Dancer is that we are human. We're human animals. We're talking about, one second. Okay. Talking about, 100% divine, 100% human. And we allow our humanity to not just allow, but approve of it, the imperfections and the quirks and the weirdness. And it's all just part of our beauty and part of our perfection instead of trying to transcend our humanity.
Yes. And those people who are new to the temple will come in and get the recordings for Underworld because of that very point that Jessica brought up. We just did an 8-week course called Underworld. There's lots of curriculum for you if you didn't participate in there to just kind of have an experience with your own humanity, right? And I think it's important if you didn't do the descent side to really get those like codes of starting to loosen up the corset, right? I like to say it that way. Like we all as women, before we start doing our own work, we go through the world wearing a corset that the collective puts on us, and we've got to loosen that up and make space and room for who we are, as just immanent human, messy, imperfect beings, right? And that really is the key. Everything that happens in our humanity, in our human world, in our day-to-day life is the spiritual food that we work with to move to the next evolution. So I'm so glad to see that so many of you are signed up. We will officially begin in August. However, it's open and there's lots of curriculum to begin with now. So if you wanted to give yourself time and then also get the extra practices that we'll have up for this month, you can join now. I'm going to do a special private transmission for the full moon tomorrow because it's a big one, and I wanted to make sure I got something exclusive for Sky Dancers in particular, so you guys can look for that. So there's still lots of time. So, if you'd like to join, we would love to have you. You guys can go to my Facebook page, or if you found this transmission through the email, there's a link to sign up for Sky Dancer. I am so glad that you guys all came and that you all stayed for this long. This was a long transmission. So thank you for your time and your attention. And I will get the replay up here pretty soon for any of those who kind of came in the middle. And I just want to say how much I appreciate you all, not just for being here on this call, but really for what we talked about in the beginning, for how you are contributing to this lineage and how this lineage really is, in a sense, an ecosystem. And each woman who is a Venusian woman and part of the red line is anchoring this kind of energy in her area. And that's so important. And I really bow to each of you and appreciate the deep work that you're doing. So thank you. And celebrating Mary Magdalene's feast day and Venus's Helical rise. Yeah, Stephanie, I'll get it to you. There's so much I kind of want to ask you anyways. I'd love to hear how you're feeling this through the field. But yeah, thank you so much to all of you. I will make sure that I put a link to join Sky Dancer somewhere easily found on my Facebook page. And if you guys have any questions, of course, just reach out to me. I'm always happy to engage, especially about this. This work lights me up. I'm always energized by it. So thank you. Deep bows to all of you. Thank you so much for being here. Coco, thank you for coming from all the way across the world. And all of you in Australia, thank you so much for being on this call. I know what it is to get up. Elizabeth, Marina, thank you. So much love. Bye.